All right, this is what we learned on Sunday and Monday is the excerpt of the speech that the Rebbe gave, basically the last speech that the Rebbe gave, and the Rebbe, the part of it that the Rebbe went over. But here we have what's called Bilti Muga. This was written by the Hasidim. The Hasidim, as I told you, the Rebbe would give these long speeches on Shabbat, and after Shabbat, the Hasidim would sit together and they would go over it by memory, what the Rebbe said. And there were some that had phenomenal memories. There was one especially called Rabbi Yoel Khan, just passed away recently. He could remember 8 hours of speeches of the Rebbe, right? And there were other fellows also that also had memories that, were not much less than his, but I mean, he was something special. And they would add on things and comment. And finally, that's what came out with these Bilti Muga. Okay. Just before we start this, we began something else last week, and I would just like to finish it. We began a Sikha of the Rebbe that's in Chelik Aleph, which is in the first portion. Let's see if we can find this over here. 1 minute. I don't know if it's worthwhile to look for this, but we will look for it. Maybe I'll just say it outside. And the speech that the Rebbe gave last time that we read was about being happy in the month of Purim, in the month of Adar. That you have to be happy in the month of Adar. And this happiness in the month of Adar, let's see, where are we? It has to permeate the whole month and everything involved in the month. But the Rebbe said, interestingly, this saying of the rabbis that you have to increase happiness in Adar, this occurs in a tractate of the Talmud that talks about fasting. It talks about tiny fasting, when there's bad things that happen, when there's no rain, especially in Israel. So they would arrange fasts in order that God would listen to our pleas and bring rain. And it talks about other bad things, other reasons you have to fast. The main fast, of course, is the fast of Tisha B'Av, when we fast because of the destruction of the temple. So it says over there that's in the month of Av. So in the month of Av, we're supposed to be sad in the month of Av. It doesn't really say you're supposed to be sad. It says you're supposed to decrease in happiness. In this tragic month of Av, we're supposed to decrease in happiness. And the Talmud says, just as when Av comes in, we decrease in happiness, so also in Adar, the month of Purim, we have to increase in happiness. In other words, the happiness of Purim comes as a comparison, as like an opposite reaction to the decrease in happiness that we have in the month of Av. So the Rebbe says, what does this mean? The fact is, the month of Av, we decrease in happiness, but you always have to be happy. Always have to be happy. Exactly the opposite. The happiness is one of the essence of Judaism, because the purpose of Judaism is to make God feel at home in this world. When does God feel at home? It says, Oz v'ched b'mechomo. God is happiness, joy. That's how it is in the upper worlds. You want God to feel happy, you have to make him feel at home. You want to make him feel at home, then we have to be happy. You have to serve God with happiness all the time. It says, but one second, but we said that before that, so what does that got to do with the month of Av being sad? So the Rebbe said like this. I don't know if you can see this. Let's see. Let me go back here. Stop the share. We'll go over to here, and then you'll see the share. So the Rebbe says like this. The fact of the matter is, that's what it says here. I'm just finishing what we started yesterday, and then we'll do this. The The fact of the matter is that bitterness has definitely a place in Judaism. And it has a very, very important place in Judaism. Yes. Bitterness has a very important place in Judaism. And according to the level of bitterness that you have, that's how happy you can be. What does bitterness mean? That you become bitter about being far from God. So it says that's the way it is in spiritual. First of all, a person has to clean off the dirt from himself. This is only done by means of being bitter. How long am I going to say, be lazy? How long am I going to run after my desires? How long is it going to be that I'm going to be, how do you say, counterproductive to myself? How long? I got to stop doing this. That's bitterness. How long is it going to be that I'm not thinking about God, saying good things, learning Torah, doing the commandments, doing what God wants? You become bitter. Why bitter? Because generally speaking, a person goes against God or doesn't do what God, because it feels good. It feels natural. Why should I change my nature? What's wrong with nature? Suddenly a person realizes, well, my nature is my biggest enemy. Right? In some aspect, not all the time. And then he becomes bitter. This bitterness makes him change. That's the month of Av. Therefore, we have to minimize happiness. According to this degree, to the degree that you are bitter, and the bitterness doesn't have to be that much. Bitterness that's the degree that you can, why does it say that the happiness of Av is commensurate to this bitterness? Because it says the greatest happiness is happiness that comes from darkness. The greatest light is light that comes from darkness. Therefore, the more bitter that you are, and the more you realize how far away you are from God, and you have to change, then when you do change, the happiness is even greater. Which isn't that the whole story of Purim, that the Jews were under this tremendous danger and threat of death. When they came out, it was a tremendous happiness. That's what's called the Yitron or Min HaChoshech. That's the holiday of Purim. That's why we have to be happy on Purim, beyond all understanding, beyond all awareness. Like it says, this whole month becomes transformed to happiness. Okay, so we finished what we started last time. Now let's go back to the Sichot that I revealed, and we'll start it off. 1 second. How does that go? Oh, it's over here. Oh, here we go. All right. If you remember, and we're learning the Sichot about the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is talking about Yakel and Pekude. Yakel means unification. Pekude means details. What can we learn from Yakel? So we can understand Yakel. That's what we read this week. That first of all, when a Jew meets another Jew, or when he looks around and he sees there's another Jew that's anywhere, he has to unify with him, to become one. It's a basic commandment of the Torah. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your friend as yourself. Kavan sins, Shu Makir, because he feels that really both of them are one thing. That each one is a portion of God from above. That's the Jewish people. That's what it's supposed to be. This is the novelty in this year when we read Vayakel alone. What's the service of a Jew on Shabbos Parshas Yakel? When they were asked, you should immediately answer to unite with another Jew and feel that you're all one. That is revealed the fact that both of them are just a portion of God from above, sons of God. Kavan sins, that's very important. Now we have to have the service of vayakel, unification, gathering together, as it is also in a person's self, that he has to also unify himself, all of his personality, his powers, his abilities to serve the Creator. Do it right now. You don't have to wait until next week, which is Pekude, which is talking about the details, which we'll talk about that next week. Now we can also add another thing that is relevant to this idea of your friend is like you. There is a difference between serving a person when he serves a God from himself and when he serves God by being together with somebody else. A serve is when a person serves God and himself. This has to be turning from bad and doing good. But in regarding to other people, the main thing is doing good in a positive way. In yourself, you have to look at what's bad about yourself, what has to be fixed, and be like we learned, just finished learning, be bitter about the bad things. But when you're dealing with other people, ignore the bad things. Even though that you have to tell another person something that he's doing wrong, right? Hare, the kol harosh, first of all, this has to come b'yechidi segula, only in rare cases. But od and ikar, shagam and yanzed, has to be done b'darki noam b'darki shalom. You want to tell somebody that's doing something wrong, right? The person is dishonest, right? He says bad things about other people. He's doing something wrong. It's a commandment of the Torah. You have to correct him. You have to correct him. It says, how are you going to correct him? There's some people that's what they're waiting for, to correct people. Oh, nothing makes them feel better than to correct someone else. If you see somebody's wrong, you correct them. Says that's not the way it's done. It's supposed to be that when you correct somebody, you see somebody clearly that he's doing something wrong, you have to be sure that it's wrong. And it's a commandment to correct him, but it has to be done for 100% for the other person's benefit, and it has to be done in a pleasant way and in a way of peace. Then it's easier for the other person to accept. Like we can see clearly, if you want to have any influence on others, how much more so on Jews? If you speak to them in a pleasant way and in a way of peace, then it's accepted more. First of all, when you say something in a pleasant way to somebody else and he disagrees with you, he's not going to scream at you and yell. He'll answer you back in a nice way. I disagree. I don't think what you're saying is correct. And you can have a conversation. Maybe what I'm saying is not correct. Could be. But at least the conversation doesn't go, what do they call it? How do they call it? Ad hominem. You don't go to the person. You're talking about the issue. Shemedabrim devarim kashim is better than if you're speaking hard things. Stringer Werter. How do you say strict words? Kamzeh, this is only in special times. The best thing is to be a good example. Like it says, Chosech shivto sone bano. It says that if you hold back your reproof of someone, how do they say spare the rod, spoil the child? It doesn't mean you have to beat your children all the time. It says rarely you have to come with words of reproof. That from it's understood that what the whole idea of shivto of your the rod, the stick that you hit the child with, that this idea has to be only if you feel the other person is your son. It says, it doesn't say that if you, what does it say? Spare the rod, spoil. In English, unfortunately, it says spare the rod, spoil the child. That's not the right translation. The simple translation is, if you spare the rod, then you hate your son. You hate your son. In other words, the person you have to treat the other person like he's your son. You really, really care about the other person. So then it's understood that the difference between a father and a son, or a grandson, this mitbadlim barov zaman, kivin shehem kulam chiluk alakamim al mamash. So then eventually you won't feel that the other person is my son, my father, because all of us are equal. It's the same thing. He's just like me. So this is even a closer relationship. So that's the idea of how to be unified with another Jew is, first of all, see only the positive. Ignore the negative things. And when it's absolutely necessary to say something to another person and to that he should correct himself, do it in the most pleasant and calm way, as though you're his father and this person is your son. But Zui, this is the old general teaching from Vayakel in the service of every single Jew, that first of all, you have to unite with other Jews. And this service in general is every single moment of the day. That if all the Jewish people feel a sense of unity, why? Because we're all sons of the same God. We're all unified, creations of the same God. Then that's the whole idea of gathering the Jewish people. Then we do the mitzvah, the commandment of love your neighbor as yourself. This, said Rabbi Akiva, is the foundation of the whole Torah. To be a portion, everyone reveals the fact that why should we be unified? Because we already are unified. Every Jew is a portion of God from above. Really, every Jew is the son of God, a part of God. The Inyan Zeh, and this is especially where we're here. The Rebbe is speaking now in 770 in his big synagogue in New York. Kasher saying when there are so many Jews and we're all together and we're doing the commandment of loving your neighbor as yourself. Even when before we pray every morning, we say, Hareini mekabel alai, I accept on myself the commandment of loving your neighbor as yourself. That every single Jew has to accept on himself before he prays that this shekain, that it's so. And Kabbalah Zu, and accepting this fact of all of us Jews are like one. This is even before all the Jews. This you do even before the Jews are actually together physically. Even if you're in your room, you're preparing for prayer. Like some people say that before you, usually there's some people, mostly you start the prayer actually begins in Hodu LaHashem Kitov. That's where it begins. And all these preparation prayers we say that beforehand, you can do it alone. You don't have to have a congregation. And especially at the beginning of the whole business, this is, I accept every Jew is like myself. Love every Jew just like yourself. Love your Jew like you love yourself. And we have no idea, believe me, we have no idea how much we love ourselves. What people are willing to do for themselves, right? Somebody's trying to steal your money, your honor, your what, you get mad. If they do it to somebody else, you don't get so angry and so. That's how you're supposed to feel for every Jew. Love begins at home. If then you love and appreciate every Jew, then you can have love and appreciation for every human being in the world. But the whole thing has to be according to the Torah. It has to be according to the Torah. In America, it was very common. The parents, they love their children so much, they let them do anything. They give them money, drugs, a hypodermic needle, to put anything they want, a new powerful motorcycle, a gun, anything the kid wants, right? He gets his parents. Okay, that I exaggerated a little bit, but unfortunately, the parents in America, they exaggerate also. Ella, but they simply don't know what's right or wrong. Ella, but Shamira Zu, this is a preparation for prayer. And then afterwards, this has two things in a tzibur, namely a tzibur. Tzibur means a gathering of Jews, 10 Jews, whether the tzibur of the 10 powers of our soul, like that's known saying of the Tzemach Tzedek, that someone said that he couldn't find a minyan to pray with, and he said, gather the 10 aspects of your soul, and that'll be your minyan. That also when you try to gather the 10 aspects of your soul together, this also has to have a preparation. Like it's known from this story itself. And therefore, the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, he needed a long time for this. Right? The Tzemach Tzedek said this to his son, and to pray with the 10 powers of your soul. He had to take a long time to prepare himself. The preparation for this is Yakel. What's Yakel? Gathering together all the Jews before you start to pray, even when you're in your room, even if you're not going to pray with any other Jews. Nevertheless, the first thing we say, The Arizal said you're supposed to say, I accept on myself the commandment of loving my neighbor as myself, loving my fellow Jew as myself, and even more. This whole thing of Vayakel has to be immediate, that we have to gather all the Jews together in the coming of the Moshiach. The Moshiach is going to gather all the Jews. That's in this year when we read Parshas Vayakel on its own, because first of all, it has to be the thing of gathering all of the Jews to the land of Israel. Take of him out immediately. And there's no time to wait for Pekude for the next Torah portion of the details. And you're a minion of counting. One group, Shekain, that this is the whole idea of counting the Jews and dealing with everyone individually. This takes time. The counting of the Jews is not just a regular, just counting, just a head count. It's not just you count them, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, this counting that we're talking about, counting the Jews, this means counting the Jews in an orderly way. The first, the second, until the last. Each one is important. This is also relevant to the tribes, right? According to each person's nature. So it's understood that this is going to take time. Even if this is done in the tremendous quickness of counting all the Jews, but nevertheless, it'll take time. Even one moment takes time. The word rega, moment, it has 3 letters in it. Reish, Gimel, Ayin. That takes time to say. And the future redemption, says the Rebbe, has to be immediately, before you have the time to say the word rega. And so therefore, it's understood that we can't wait for next week's Torah portion, Pekude. What's the Rebbe trying to point to us? This idea of the future redemption, it should not be in the future. It has to be right now. And if it's not, then we should be very disappointed. On the other hand, the only way to make it happen now is to be happy. So on one hand, we're tremendously disappointed that the redemption has not come up to now. But on the other hand, now is constant. It's always now. El-Lakol Rosh, first of all, we have to have gathering all the Jewish people. All the Jewish people will wake up. The Holy Temple will come to the land of Israel. It'll fall down from heaven. It's pretty fantastic. But going out of Egypt is no less fantastic. And that's the basis of Judaism. We mention it in all of our prayers. And after all the Jews are gathered together, then we can have Pekude, then we can deal with the individual differences and uniqueness of each one, the details. That'll be in the time of the future redemption. Then we'll deal with that. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow we're on Zion, right? Beautiful. Now let's learn the Yom Yom. Yom Yom. This Yom Yom, as we said before, this is a compilation of sayings of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak. Saying, and it was gathered together by the Rebbe. The term Chassid wasn't originated by the Baal Shem Tov. The sages apply this term Chassid even to Adam. It says Adam Chassid Haya. It describes the word Chassid, it means perfection and excellence in intellect or emotive character traits, or in both. But Chabad, a Hasidic doctrine, a Chassid is a person who recognizes who he is and his standing in the knowledge and study of Torah, as well as his situation in doing the commandments. In other words, he makes a clear assessment of himself. He knows what he's lacking, and he tries to fill that void. He accepts what's called the yoke of God, doesn't fool himself. A chassid is a person that does not fool himself. As far as his relationship to God, relationship to himself, and relationship to the world. And he tries to correct whatever he can as completely as he can. Be with us at 3:00. We're learning the Megillah of Purim. We're now on chapter 4. Haman is going to make the decree. Don't miss it. Have a good day with Moshiach now. Shalom uvracha.